Ghana's got some support here. The African Peer Review Mechanism, the APRM, which is an autonomous entity of the African Union that supports African countries in the area of credit ratings and undertakes routine reviews of rating outcomes assigned by international credit agencies on African countries, has come out in support of Ghana and says that it corroborates the observations that were made by the government of Ghana in its statement, which, according to them, highlights significant fundamentals that contradict the downgrade action by Moody's. Joining us to discuss further is Ibukun Omoyeni, who is an economist with Vetiva Capital Management Ltd. Ibukun, thank you so much for joining us. Good afternoon to you. What do you make of this unfolding situation between Ghana and Moody's? What's your take?
And good afternoon, Lotus. Thanks for having me. I think it's a very interesting situation, really, considering the fact that Ghana as a nation is one of the countries with stable economic growth. But one of the issues we've discovered is that debt service is taking a significant portion of its revenue. And I think the key bone of contention here is that Ghana has been issuing Eurobonds year in, year out. And looking at the fact that a lot of foreign investors are within its local bonds. So if the foreign investors decide to sell off, that could put the downward pressure on the external reserves and pose a risk to Ghana's fiscal space. So it's a mix of all these domestic issues. On the global side, we are looking at higher interest rates as a result of monetary policy normalization in the US. So if the US decides to increase interest rates, it's going to affect Eurobond issuances. And of course, that's what's leading to this decision. Let me recall quickly that Fitch actually downgraded Ghana's debt a while ago. That was in January, thereabout. But it was from B to B minus, while that of Moody's is towards the C levels, which is deeper the junk grade. And of course, it has implications for further issuances.
Thanks, Ibukun. What do you make of we had that list a few minutes ago, the Ghanaian government's response to the Moody's downgrade, saying that they missed out on fundamental issues, the analyst in particular isn't very experienced, and so on and so forth. What do you make of the Ghanaian government's response?
I think I would like to stick with the issues, right? I think I checked out the analyst's experience on LinkedIn, and I found out that she has about 14 years experience within the organization. So probably she was just, so we don't know whether she was just mobilized to look over Ghana. But again, the key issues remain that you need to look at Ghana's fiscal space. You recall that when the finance minister read out the budget, there was an adverse reaction in the bond markets, right? So the bond markets have already reflected these concerns, and I think that should be the major bone of contention. I don't really think the credit analysts is more to blame, although one could say that probably they should have given Ghana and other sovereigns time before issuing such downgrades. But again, once credit analysts notice any major risk, they may have to flag it, and that's why they are doing their job.
Thanks. And you mentioned the Eurobonds. We've seen the Eurobond yields for Ghana, rise in recent weeks. How much of an issue is that for Ghana?
Of course, rising Eurobond yields, that signifies a sell-off, right? When you are seeing sell-offs on Eurobond yields, it refers to risk-off sentiment. And mind you, there are two factors we consider. First of all, we are looking at Ghana's debt to GDP, which is as high as 78%, and we are also looking at high debt service to revenue. We're also looking at the US Fed. So those factors had already caused an earlier knee-jerk reaction to the bond instrument. You also look at the fiscal space. The government of Ghana had the initial deficit target of 5% of GDP, but when it released its recent budget statement, it was targeting 7% of GDP. And considering the fact that its measures to raise revenue has been met with resistance. So that's why we are seeing that reaction in the Eurobond market.
And so, Ibukun, what are Ghana's options in terms of raising revenue when you consider the fiscal structure of the country?
Of course, Ghana really needs to look inwards and factors of raising revenue. I believe that's one of the reasons why they decided to impose a 1.75% levy on mobile transactions, and of course that has not been met. That has not been met with that's been met with resistance, right, across the nation, and of course that shows you that there's a lot of pressure from the pandemic, right? There's this balance between trying to raise revenue and not imposing a lot of burden on the citizens. So that is where there's a bit of a controversy, and the Ghana government to look inwards. Are there tax? Does it need to expand its tax base? Is there other measures that would not have a significant impact on lower income citizens, right? Because taxation has to be progressive. Is there a way you could tax the rich? Is there a better way of taxing the rich? So it needs to really look inwards and find out those revenue measures.
In fact, you mentioned the e-levy. There was that big fist fight in Parliament over the levy. They took a recess. I think they're back to discuss it. What are the chances? I mean, you're not a politician. I mean, what are the chances of it passing?
Of course, I'm looking at the challenges from that previous fight in the Parliament. Chances are really slim, right? And that's further complicated by the fact that the current president his party does not have a ruling majority in the Parliament. After the 2020 elections, we saw that there was a leveling, right, across the two major parties. So while a party had 137, the other party had 136, compared to the majority the ruling party had in the previous election. So that further adds to the uncertainties with regards to raising revenue through imposing the e-levy.
Now, there was still on this e-levy matter, I think there was a member of parliament for the Afigia Kwabre North. I think his name is Collins Adomako Mensah. He was on radio in Ghana, urging the people of Ghana to support the bill. That's for the e-level to pass. How would you assess the government's sensitization efforts with respect to trying to get the Ghanaian public on their side to support the levy?
Right. Well, it's going to be very difficult, right? Just like you pointed to earlier, that inflation in Ghana is rising, right? And this is one of the income measures for low-income earners, right? And you want to impose a levy on that, right? They are definitely going to be against it. It's just normal economics, right? The government has to actually look for further ways. Are there other measures that could have less retrogressive impact, right? Because if you want to look at the laws of taxation, you want to ensure that your tax measures are progressive and not regressive. So once the tax measure impacts low-income citizens significantly, that could be a regressive tax measure. So it needs to actually look inwards and find what are the other ways to raise revenue, perhaps through looking at richer citizens. How can you target how can you increase the tax base? So looking at the e-levy is a very emotional issue, really, and it might be very difficult. It might be very difficult trying to pass that in this current environment.
Now, if it doesn't pass, I think you mentioned Fitch. I think you already mentioned Fitch of your downgrade. So you've got Fitch, you've got Moody's downgrades. Other, I think S&P would probably be another agency. But do you see other agencies, following in that regard and further downgrading Ghana?
Well, like I said, Fitch had already downgraded Ghana, but S&P is yet to release a downgrade or an upgrade. But again, this actually reflects the downgrade of a country's credit rating. Actually reflects that if there's going to be a new issue of a Eurobond, investors are going to price in that added risk from the downgrade. And of course, that's why the Ghanaian government is worried, especially at this time where the US is going to be increasing interest rates, and locally the local bond market has high yields. If you look at 3 to 5 year bond yields, around 19 to 20%. So it's going to be extremely difficult for Ghana in these times. It really has to look inwards and try to diversify and mobilize revenue, and that will solve this fiscal deficit problem.
All right, very interesting developments coming out of Ghana. Ibukun Omoyeni, economist with Vetiva Capital Management Ltd. Thank you so much for taking us through that.